Hi there, welcome along to 2013 Film Vlog once again. We obviously haven't been here for quite a while since I've been away and whatever else, but we're going to be back here now and looking at another two films. We've got, first of all, The Act of Killing, and then if we have time we'll also look at The Comedian as well. So we're going to start off with The Act of Killing, which is a new documentary from Joshua Oppenheimer, and I had the exceptional good fortune to get a ticket to the Northeast premiere of this one. So we got to see the full director's cut, which is exceptionally long, plus we also got an hour's Q&A afterwards with the director as well. So realistically, we couldn't have asked for a better screening to see this film in. And for anyone that sort of keeps up with the art house world, this is one of those films that really has been causing quite a stir over the past few weeks. I think most people go in like I did, not really knowing too much about it. All I knew was that it was a documentary about a genocide that took place in Indonesia in 1965, and it was basically, from what I understood, the perpetrators of this genocide talking about what they'd done and any remorse, or as it turns out, lack of remorse they felt. But it's so much more than that. It's a very, very difficult film. It's certainly a very long film, particularly when you saw the director's cut. The version we saw was the full-length version, which was 2 hours and 40 minutes long, I think. But really, it feels an awful lot longer than that, because it really is one of these films that absolutely bludgeons you over the head. It just knocks every emotion out of you. It's sort of the power, really, of what documentary filmmaking is all about. Ostensibly, what happens is Joshua Oppenheimer is wandering around Indonesia, and he's talking to a gentleman called Anwar Congo, who was the head of a paramilitary group in the 1960s, along with his deputy, Hairman. And basically what they were tasked with doing was rooting out and punishing and ultimately killing suspected communists. And we learn over the course of the film that the definition of communist was one that was basically, it was an exceptionally elastic definition. It basically meant they had the power to kill anyone that they felt they wanted to kill. There was very, very little control over what they were doing, and this whole action was sanctioned by the government. And what's sort of more shocking is that even today, these men are still held up as heroes. Now, what this could ultimately descend into will be some sort of very, very maudlin account, very high-handed, sort of say, this was a terrible thing, how could they have done this? But this isn't what happens. What Joshua Oppenheimer does here, which is truly extraordinary, is that he invites Anwar Congo and Hairman and some of their other companions to recreate some of the scenes and some of the things they did in the style of their favourite films. So, for example, Anwar Congo is a huge fan of John Wayne. So at one point they have a reconstruction where he takes a man out into the woods and he dresses like a cowboy before strangling him. There's another one where they're all quite big fans of mafia films, and they have Hairman basically garrotting Anwar Congo in the style of a mafia snitch. And these are the really, really powerful scenes, because you sort of get the impression of just how they really see what it was that they did. Because it's still, to them, just seemingly this huge joke, this not a real thing. They talk in such dispassionate terms of how they could kill people in the most effective way to try and avoid getting blood everywhere. There's one extraordinary scene in which they're all sitting down and looking at small photographs, and Anwar Congo sort of says, I could never wear the trousers that I'm wearing now. If you're having a massacre, you have to wear jeans to soak up the blood. And this is said in such a dispassionate way, in that it's not in any way, it's not gloating, it's not triumphalist, it's just simply a matter-of-fact statement. And the fact is that he doesn't seem to comprehend that anything that he's done in his past is wrong. They at one point go for this huge, huge scene in which basically they recreate the burning down of a village, and they have to conscript all these villagers to come and play the parts of the communists that they killed. And you just, half the time, you're just watching this and seeing the utter glee on their faces. And the fact is that they genuinely don't seem to understand or indeed feel any kind of remorse for these truly horrendous actions that they've committed. And what you find more and more is that the state in itself is completely complicit in what's going on, because as far as the state is concerned, they've done a good thing, and everywhere Anwar Congo goes, he is greeted as an absolute hero, because he is the man who essentially destroyed the communists. And yet the definition of communist became so loose and so wide that it just basically fulfilled anyone who wasn't doing what they wanted him to do. I mean, it becomes a really, really extraordinary piece, particularly at one point when one of Anwar Congo's old companions comes back, and they're having sort of a chat about the old days and what they did. And Anwar Congo's companion is sort of saying that effectively it started off by they were persecuting just the communists, and then they decided they'd persecute anyone who was Chinese. At one point, he talks about how he went through an entire street and just massacred anyone who looked Chinese, including his girlfriend's father, who didn't like him. And again, it's just this completely arbitrary and dispassionate discussion of the fact that you've taken another human life, and yet this doesn't seem to have any effect on them. They seem to just simply be content with the fact that's what they've done, that's part of their life. They talk about it no more dispassionately than you or I would discuss any previous jobs that we've had. It's truly an extraordinary piece of work. So, I mean, I personally never before have genuinely stared at a screen with a completely slack jaw, just totally overwhelmed and horrified by what you're seeing. Because ultimately, this is the only real reaction you can have, is because you just cannot comprehend how someone can have taken a life, many, many, many lives, and yet feel no remorse, not struggle with any kind of internal conflict, to be so certain that what they've done is right, even though these people were summarily executed in horrible ways with no trial. And half the time, when they're doing these reconstructions, they're all just there and they're sort of laughing and joking and thinking, do you not truly realise what it is that you've done? Sort of the whole thing very much ends with Anwar Congo being taken back to the scene of his first murder and being asked to go through once again what exactly he did and how they killed these people. Except this time, it's a bit different because Anwar Congo has been touched by something. He's just been through a reconstruction in which he plays sort of a mafia snitch, and essentially he is faux strangled in the scene, which he watches again, and he says to Joshua Oppenheimer that for the first time he truly understands what his victims must have felt like. And Oppenheimer brilliantly, rather than just letting this sit and saying, he's finally come to realise it, no, he calls upon it. And he says, no, you don't. You don't feel anything of what it was like to be one of your victims. Because ultimately, you know full well in this scene, this is just film. There's no harm done to you. Your victims knew they were going to die. This is completely different. You cannot feel what it is like to be where they were. And it's a really touching challenge between the two of them, because I think a lot of people making this film would have just left it there and just we finally start to see Anwar Congo understand the enormity of what it is that he's done. But no, Oppenheimer pushes it, and they go back to the scene of the first killing, and Anwar Congo now ends up just retching in the flower beds. And it's very much left open how the film goes, whether you truly believe this is Anwar Congo finally starting to show some remorse for what he's done, or whether it's just yet another trick to try and make him appear more sympathetic. I mean, certainly in the Q&A afterwards, Joshua Oppenheimer himself was in no doubt at all. He said that he believes, because he was there, that it was definitely genuine retching, and Anwar Congo genuinely did feel spontaneously, for the first time, guilt and remorse for the things that he'd done. Whether you believe that or not, I don't think I'd go and know. What we certainly do know is that the Indonesian government really, really, really hate this film, because it paints them in an incredibly bad light. And there's now a movement across the world through this film to try and get people to petition the Indonesian government to begin by saying sorry to the families and the descendants of these millions of communists, who were massacred so unfairly in the name of government. This was not some militia out on its own. This is a state-funded act of genocide, which still goes on to this day. You even see during the film the current president addressing these yahoos who've formed this Peninsula Youth, which is their militant organisation. And it's really horrendous to see the numbers of people who are in what is basically just a group of terrorist thugs who basically ride around the countryside just meting out justice as they see fit. There's no real element of the rule of law, it seems, within Indonesia. It's all just controlled by this small group of basically terrorists, and yet they're state-funded terrorists. I mean, it's a really, truly amazing film. I mean, at no point at all does it become an easy watch. At times, it is genuinely just horrible, horrible, horrible to have to watch it and to see these things and these people who act with total lack of remorse for anything they've done. I mean, one of the worst scenes of all is where we see a reporter from back in the day, and he talks about how he had no idea of what was going on, and he doesn't think that many people in the village knew what was happening. And basically Congo and his cohorts say to him, no, you knew exactly what was going on. It was happening next door to your office. Everybody knew what we were doing. And this is where it gets a bit strange, is that there are now people trying to rewrite history and to try and pretend they were unaware. And I think a lot of the government as well are trying to act like they were unaware of what happened. And what the film is trying to show is no, they were all totally complicit. What makes the whole thing very interesting is that the original idea for the film was to interview survivors of this genocide. But every time Oppenheimer tried to interview them, he got disrupted by state police, that kind of thing. So instead, he ended up wandering around and finding the perpetrators instead, asking them what they'd done. And it was then that it becomes this truly remarkable film. I think if this was just a film in which the survivors and the affectees simply talked about what it had all meant to them, I don't think it would be anything like as powerful as it is. I think the true power of this film comes from the fact that these are people who just seem to show absolutely no comprehension of the truly wicked acts they've committed. And even when we get to the end and we sort of see potentially Anwar Congo's revelation and that he truly starts to feel sorry for what he's done, we still aren't really sure whether or not actually that really was him atoning for it, or actually it's just yet more him trying to play for the gallery. I mean, I personally I choose to believe that he is genuinely feeling remorse, because I don't like to think of a world in which there are people out there who can commit such acts of utter barbarism and feel no remorse, no shame, no guilt at all for what they've done. I mean, what I would say is this is a truly, truly remarkable film, and Joshua Oppenheimer, I mean, it's a real labour of love. It's been completed and spliced together over a number of years to try and get this. Effectively, what Oppenheimer was saying after the film was that were he to ever return again to Indonesia, it's unlikely to get out alive. That's how furious the Indonesian government are that he's made this film. But what he's done is he's drawn attention to something that most of us probably never even knew had happened. I certainly had no idea this had happened. So it's a beautifully made film. It's a very, very tough watch. I certainly don't think it's for everyone. But if you have an interest in the human condition, in what we as human beings are capable of, in the history of that part of the world, and just the true shock of seeing a government so completely in denial that it not only refuses to apologise for the genocide of millions and millions of suspected communists, but also will go as far as to basically threaten to kill a director who's raised this issue and actually said, let's start talking about what happened, and let's start off with you apologising for what you did. It truly is an absolutely remarkable film. If you do get a chance to see it, I would advise you to go in, be prepared, because it's not an easy watch, and it is a very long film. But it's one of these that is so, so worth watching, that you will come out and it'll stay with you for weeks and weeks afterwards, and you will just leave with this sense of built-in fury against a government for something you never even knew happened. 2 hours previously, you had no idea what this is about, and yet now you're walking out and you're feeling genuine fury towards a government and a people who would allow this kind of thing to happen. We're not talking about hundreds of years ago in a different world. We're talking about the 1960s. It really is a film that is so worth watching. I honestly, I can't see, come the end of the year, this not being exceptionally high in my top 10 films of the year, because it really did so strongly affect me. And I would say, given a chance, just go and catch it. I'll see you soon. Try.